Hi, John here. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be writing this story, I'd have laughed it off. But here we are, so get ready because it's going to be a wild ride. To understand the situation fully, you've got to know how it all started. It was one of those classic rainy days in Edinburgh is the kind of place where it rains lightly, almost romantically, but just enough to need an umbrella. The streets were wet from the fresh rain, and the cobblestones were glistening with tiny puddles that reflected the gray sky. Most people were hurrying along, but I was in no hurry at all. I was so engrossed in the beauty of the rain that I was trying to take a picture of the castle from this particular angle when I bumped into someone looking down. I saw this girl, Alicia, on the ground, with her papers all scattered and her umbrella flipped inside out. What caught my attention was her reaction. She was laughing. She wasn't embarrassed or angry, just genuinely laughing at the mess we'd created. We got to talking and there was this instant connection. It's crazy, it felt like I'd known her for ages. She had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to dance when she spoke and a laugh that was so contagious I found myself chuckling along even when nothing was particularly funny. Alicia was studying art history and had a deep love for Edinburgh's architecture. She showed me the city through her eyes that day and I was utterly captivated, both by her and the stories she told. Our dates were straight out of a rom-com, picnics in Princess Street gardens, late-night walks. Along the Royal Mile, we shared stories, dreams and churros from that tiny stall near the Scottish National Gallery. It felt like fate had thrown us together when I proposed only a few months later under the twinkling fairy lights of Circus Lane. She said yes without hesitation. Our friends said we were mad for rushing things. But it just felt right. We were young, in love and had dreams as vast as the sky. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, but it was brimming with genuine happiness. It was like something out of a fairy tale. I didn't realize that every story has its twists and turns, but that's for another time. This is where it all started. Even though I didn't fully realize it at the time, my gut feelings started to creep in. After the fairy tale start, life began settling into a sort of rhythm. We were newlyweds, figuring out how to live together, sharing our space and our lives. The fun part was getting to know all of Alia's friends. She had this close-knit group of friends. There was a knitting group from college that met every other week, and I sometimes joined in. There was one friend of hers, Zara, who always stood out. She was a fiery redhead with an incredibly sharp wit and a protective aura around Elia. One day after one of those dinner get-togethers, I was helping clean up when Zara cornered me in the kitchen. She looked serious and almost concerned. I remember thinking she was going to talk about some diet or something. Kitchen hack, but no. She leaned in and whispered in a low voice that I could barely hear over the noise of the party, "John, Alia isn't who you think she is." I was taken aback. Was this some sort of joke? I chuckled awkwardly, trying to brush it off, thinking maybe this was some weird way of hers to break the ice. But the look on Zara's face was serious. She continued, "Just be careful. Watch out for signs." I admit I was alarmed. I brushed them aside, though, because I thought maybe Zara was just being overly protective or perhaps she had some unresolved issues with Alicia. Besides, I trusted Alicia. Our love story felt too real and too raw to be tainted by whatever Zara was hinting at. I gave Zara a tight smile and nodded, saying thanks for the concern, but I trust Alicia with all my heart. Zara just looked at me with sad eyes as if she wished she could say more but was bound by some. That night, as I lay in bed next to Alicia, her rhythmic breathing lulling me to sleep, I couldn't shake off Zara's words. Every time doubt crept in, I'd brush it away. Love was about trust, right? Reddit, as you'll see, planted a seed that would grow into a cloud of doubt. So, let's not forget that trust is fragile. Once there's even a tiny crack in its foundation, everything else seems a little off. I have to admit that Zara's words stuck with me. Maybe it was that hint of doubt that made me notice things I would have otherwise overlooked. Fast forward a few weeks and it was a Saturday morning. Alicia had this ritual of heading out to her favorite cafe every Saturday to catch up on her reading. She'd get this massive cup of coffee. She'd often treat herself to a chai latte and spend the morning reading. I used to tease her about her weekend ritual, but I loved how passionate she was about it. That morning, she left her bag on the kitchen table in her hurry and called out, laughing, "If I forget, could you remember to pack that for me too?" I remember laughing at her adorable clumsiness after she left. I decided to be the good husband and pack up her essentials, her wallet, her book and her favorite pen, but as I was doing so, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic at the bottom of her bag. I pulled out a shimmering necklace. It was delicate with a sparkling pendant that had I noticed an intricate design on the necklace, but I didn't recognize it. It was beautiful, but also entirely unfamiliar. I had never seen it on Alicia, and I certainly hadn't gifted it to her. My first thought was that it might be a family heirloom or something she'd bought recently. Later that evening, as we settled in with some takeaway in a movie, I casually brought it up. "Hey, I found this necklace," I said. "In your bag, it's pretty new." She looked momentarily taken aback and then replied, "Oh, that. It's from my aunt. She gave it to me last week when I visited her." She quickly took it from my hand and set it aside, but I felt something was off. It was in the split second of hesitation before she answered, or maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact just then. Or maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but it felt like there was something she wasn't telling me. I really wanted to believe her. I told myself that Zara's words were just playing tricks on my mind and that there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for the necklace. But as the night wore on and as Alicia snuggled up to me, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The necklace felt like an anchor, pulling me down into a sea of doubt. Reddit things started spiraling from there, and I felt like I was in one of those mystery thriller movies in the days following the necklace incident. I tried to get back to our normal rhythm. We laughed, made plans, even talked about taking a trip to the Highlands together, but from time to time, I noticed Alicia looking a bit distant and lost in thought. I figured it was probably just stress or maybe some issues at her work. We all have those moments, right? One night, we were curled up on our couch watching a cheesy rom-com. We were sharing a blanket, and Alicia had her phone next to her on the couch as the movie played. I noticed her phone lighting up. Buzz, pause, buzz again. Alicia's popular and her phone's almost always buzzing, but that night every time it did she would subtly shift her position, ensuring the screen stayed hidden from my view. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the movie, but it was like a mosquito in a quiet room, impossible to ignore. Then, during a particularly quiet scene in the movie, it buzzed again, lighting up bright enough for me to catch a glimpse of a message from Elle that read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." My heart sank. In the middle of the movie, it buzzed again, bright enough for me to catch a glimpse of a message from Elle that read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." My heart sank. In the story, it wasn't just a casual meetup, there was intimacy in those words. Who was Elle? None of her close friends had names starting with that letter. I mustered up as casually as I could. I asked who was texting her at that late hour. She glanced at her phone and replied, "Oh, just some work stuff, you know how it is." She didn't open the message, though. Instead, she turned off her phone screen and snuggled closer to me. Sleep was elusive that night. Every worst-case scenario played out in my mind. Was it a coworker? An old flame? The unknowns were. It was eating at me, but more than anything it was the secrecy. She was hiding it from me. If it was innocent, why not just tell me the next morning? She was gone early, leaving a note about an early work meeting. I was restless, debating whether to confront her or to let it go. By evening, I decided that trust was key. I'd been acting like a crazy, paranoid husband. The situation just kept getting worse. Here's where things took a turn for the worse. It was on a Thursday afternoon when I met up with my friend Theo for a pint at our local pub. We'd been friends since high school, and he'd recently moved to London for work. He was back in Edinburgh for a few days, and we were catching up on life, work, and everything in between. The usual banter about halfway through our second pint, Theo asked John and Alicia if everything was okay. Tipsy, I remember, replied, "Yeah, mate, why?" Theo took a deep breath and said, "I might be wrong, and I don't want to cause any trouble, but I thought I saw Alicia at King's Cross Station in London last Tuesday. She was with some guy, tall, dark-haired, who looked a bit like a model. They seemed close. My heart started racing. Alicia hadn't mentioned going to London. In fact, she told me she had meetings in Birmingham that day. I tried to keep my composure. Theo, are you sure it was her? King's Cross is always packed. Could have been anyone. Theo looked uncomfortable. I wasn't. I was just waiting for my train, but I'm pretty sure it was her. She had that unique pendant around her neck, the one you found in her bag. I took a deep breath. My mind was racing. Was Theo mistaken? But the mention of the necklace made it hard to believe it was just a coincidence. I finished my drink and headed home. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. I decided to confront Alicia about it. As I stepped into our apartment, she greeted me with her usual bright smile, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I was surprised to see her with that bright smile, as if nothing was wrong. She asked me about my meeting with Theo. I told her I wasn't in London last Tuesday. She seemed surprised, but then she said, "Oh, you were in Birmingham?" I told her I was, and she asked me why Theo said he saw me at King's Cross with someone. I told her Theo must have mistaken me for someone else. Maybe he saw someone else who looked like me. Who looked like me? I really wanted to believe her. I did, but the lies, the necklace, the texts, everything, made it hard to see through the fog of doubt. She must have noticed the skepticism on my face because she came over, held my face and said, "John, you trust me, right?" and read it as much as I wanted to scream, "Yes." All I managed was a nod, while my insights continued their turmoil. The journey from total trust to total doubt is. I was at a crossroads, wondering which path to take. Buckle up, Reddit. This chapter in our saga is wild. It was a sunny Saturday morning, almost deceptively peaceful given the storm that was brewing inside our relationship. I was tidying up the study, clearing out old papers and random junk we'd accumulated over the years in my quest for order. I opened a drawer that was Alia's domain, mostly filled with. I found a folded paper that looked like a hotel booking confirmation. I was curious, but I know it was wrong to snoop. I opened it, and it was a reservation for the Ritz in London. There was a luxurious suite for a weekend, and it was under Alicia's name. My heart raced. I remembered seeing Theo in London. This was evidence, right? Or was I jumping to conclusions? I needed answers that evening over dinner. I slid the confirmation across the table. "I found this today," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was planning a trip to London. Alia's eyes widened momentarily, but she quickly regained her composure. "Oh, it's a surprise for Zara's birthday. I wanted to treat her to a fancy weekend. You know, a girl's trip kind of thing. Remember?" Zara, who'd warned me about Alicia, didn't make any sense. If Zara felt Alicia was hiding something from me, why would she be planning a luxurious weekend away with her? "Why didn't you tell me, and why would you take Zara to the Ritz? It seems excessive." She hesitated, biting her lip. "I just wanted it to be a surprise for everyone. After everything that's happened recently, I thought Zara and I could use some bonding time. I read the stories and they didn't add up. It seemed like my wife was spinning tales right in front of me. My trust was on thin ice and the weight of all these secrets threatened to break it completely. I tried to push the doubts aside, hoping there was some grain of truth in her words. But the idea of my Alicia at the Ritz with someone who wasn't me painted a picture I couldn't ignore. Would I ever find out the truth behind all these half-truths? I knew I had to speak to Zara if there was even a grain of truth in Alicia's story. Zara would be my way of finding out the truth, but if Alicia was lying, well, Zara had already warned me once, hadn't she? I gave Zara a call and we decided to meet at this quiet little cafe in Edinburgh, the kind of place where you can have a private conversation even amidst the clatter of cups and saucers. I walked in and spotted Zara by the window. She looked surprised and concerned. I took a deep breath and walked over. Zara didn't waste any time. "John, why did you want to meet? Is everything okay with Alicia? I showed her the hotel booking confirmation. Alia told me she booked this for your birthday. Is it true that you went on a girls' trip to the Ritz? Zara's eyes went wide in shock. John, I have no idea what you're talking about. My birthday isn't even around this date and I haven't planned any trips with Alicia. I felt a sinking feeling. I'd been warned about Alicia, but Zara cut me off. Her voice was soft. John, I've been noticing Alicia acting strange lately. She's been distancing herself and making excuses. She's always on her phone. I thought it was just stress, but now I'm genuinely worried. I'm genuinely worried now. Theo's seen the texts, the necklace, and now this. Each lie was a dagger slowly piercing the trust one once had in Alicia and Zara. What do you think is going on? She sighed deeply, looking out the window. I wish I knew, John, but something's definitely up. As we parted ways, Zara hugged me, whispering, find out the truth, John, for both of us. As I walked home through Edinburgh, which once felt like a haven for our love story, it now felt like a labyrinth with secrets lurking in every corner. But one thing was clear, I was determined to find my way out and uncover the truth about Alicia's web of lies. If you thought this journey was a roller coaster, you're in for a shocker. Hold on to your hats. I decided to get to the bottom of this. No more doubts, no more second guessing. I had to see for myself, so I decided to surprise Alia during her supposed girls' trip to the Ritz. If she was indeed there with Zara, I'd apologize, tell her it was a romantic gesture gone wrong and make amends. If not, well, I needed to know the truth. I took an early train to London, my thoughts racing. As I arrived at the Ritz, I was blown away by the sheer opulence and grandeur of the place. Was this really where Alicia's secrets was set? I took a deep breath and approached the front desk, hoping to come up with a believable excuse for them to tell me Elsa's room number. But as luck would have it, I didn't need one. From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of her in the hotel bar, laughing. Her hair was dancing around her face, but it wasn't Zara sitting across from her. It was a man. He was tall, dark-haired, and there was something about him that tugged at my memory. As I inched closer, I realized that the man was Lucas. My Lucas. My long-lost brother who had taken off years ago to travel the world, leaving his past behind. We had lost touch, and my last memory of him was as I was a spirited teenager, not the polished man in front of me. I remember the laughter, the touching of hands, the shared glances. It wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. I felt betrayed, not just by a partner but by my own family. I retreated to a quiet corner and watched them for what felt like hours, trying to process the scene unfolding in front of me. Questions clouded my mind. How did they meet? How long had they known each other? I felt like I was in a foreign country, surrounded by strangers. I was overwhelmed by emotions and the gravity of the situation. I withdrew from the situation, leaving behind two people who meant a lot to me. Their world was now intertwined in ways I could never have imagined. Reddit, I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. I was betrayed by both my partner and my own flesh and blood. I'd never really thought about it before, but blood is something you can't really describe. After leaving the RITS, I went to a solicitor's office, driven by raw emotion. I had divorce papers drawn up immediately. It felt impulsive and rash, even, but in that moment, it was the only tangible action that seemed to provide some semblance of control over the spiraling chaos. With the papers in hand, I headed back to the RITS. I was a man on a mission. I had to confront this and bring this chapter of my life to a close. I wanted answers, but more than that I wanted closure. When I went back to the bar, I saw them there, still engrossed in their world. The weight of the papers in my hand felt both heavy and liberating. I summoned all the strength I had left and marched up to them without a word. I slammed the divorce papers onto their table, breaking the intimate bubble they were in. A sharp noise made nearby patrons turn and look at us. Alia's eyes widened in horror. "John, what's this?" she whispered, her voice shaky. Lucas looked up. His face was pale, and I could see guilt in his eyes. "John, let me explain," he began, but I raised a hand to stop him. "There's nothing to explain," I said coldly. "I saw everything." Elia's eyes filled with tears. "John, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. I was lost. I was lonely. It wasn't. It was bound to happen." Tears streamed down her face, but they no longer had the power to move me. "You were lost," I said, my voice dripping with bitterness. "It seems like you found your way pretty easily to Lucas." Lucas, always the smooth talker, he tried to intervene. "John, we didn't plan for this. It just happened, but I was done. Done with the lies, the deceit, and the heartbreak." "Save it," I spat. "You both deserve each other." Turning on my heel, I walked away. I walked away from the mess I'd left behind. The noise of the city outside was like the chaos in my mind, but amidst it all, I found a quiet determination to rebuild and move forward from this pain. It's hard to describe the emotions you feel when the people you trust betray you. It's like drowning, like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. I left the Ritz that day, ready to move on from the betrayal and start healing. This is the final chapter of this painful story. Brace yourselves. The cold London air felt sharp against my skin as I left the Ritz. The city lights, the place that once represented dreams and possibilities, now only cast shadows of doubt and pain. Each step took me further from the life I had known, the love I had felt, and the trust one had so effortlessly given. As the tube whisked me away, I was haunted by memories of our first meeting in the rain. I was walking through the streets of Edinburgh, soaked to the bone. I was thinking about Elysia and how much I loved her, and about Lucas and how much I used to laugh with him when we were kids. But now, everything was different. I got to the station and sat down on a bench to watch the world go by. People rushed past me, each with their own story. I realized that, no matter how unique our stories are, we're all bound by the threads of love, trust, and heartbreak. Tears welled up, blurring my vision. I wasn't crying for love lost or betrayal. It was the sheer unexpectedness of it all, the abrupt realization. I got on a train heading north, away from London. I didn't have a destination in mind, but that didn't matter. I needed to get away, to find a place where memories wouldn't haunt every corner. Hours turned into days. The rhythmic chugging of the train, the changing landscapes outside, the kindness of strangers, they all became a balm to my wounded soul. Slowly, the tight knot in my chest began to loosen. Finally, I alighted in Manchester, a city I had no connections with, a blank canvas. It felt right here amidst the red bricked buildings and bustling streets. I would rebuild, not to forget but to carry forward, bearing the scars of my past yet not letting them define me. So here I am, writing this out and sharing my story with you. I don't know what the future holds, but I've learned that life is unpredictable. It throws curveballs when you least expect them, but in the face of heartbreak, all we can do is pick up the pieces and keep moving forward. Thanks for listening. It's not the ending I had hoped for, but it's the one I've got, and maybe, just maybe, that's okay.